let's kick off then. Nau mai hoki mai ki te wānanga I te rā. Te ata te pōnei, welcome back to this workshop series where we are collaborating towards close to nature continuous cover business models for Aotearoa New Zealand. If this is your first time, welcome. I'm just going to hand the time to Mato Ernest mō te karaka timatanga for this morning's opening invocation.
Okay, hear me all right, Ramona?
Aye.
Morning, everybody. Kia ora tātou katoa. E hariana tātou, hariana ki te rongorongo ngā kōrero o te rāni. Me klakia. E pā te matua ko koe tēnei. E tahuru mai ki tō taringa wainga nui a tātou e whakawhiti kōrero nei. E mohiana I roto I tō kupu. I te rapu ano a koe, te tahi tangata I roto I a rātou. Hei hanga I te taiapa. Hei tū ki te wāhi pakaru ki tōku aroaro mō te whenua. Hei mea kia whakangarongia mea ahau. Hoeo ki haia e kite. Nā, hokoi tērā tō hia, kia tū hoki te tangata I wainga nui mō te whenua. Nā, I roto I tō kupu e menga nei, ko wai tāku e unga ai, ko wai tātou e haere. Ano ko ahau, tēnei ahau. Ngā rea ko ahau. Tonongia ko ahau. Tātou hoki tēnei I te mahi kia tika hoki tō tātou whenua mō tō tātou ngahi, mō ngā whakatupuranga ko te haere mai. No reira, whakamana ngia tēnei o tātou e hui mai nei e whakawhiti kōrero kia tatu marika nei mō ngā mea tika anga mua. No reira e pā te matua e whakamuimiti ana ki a koe, whakawhetai ana I roto I tēnei āhuatanga. E nei ino I roto I tō ingo tapua tō tātou auriki a Ukraiti. Amen.
Amen. Nā mihi mō te karakia o tātou kaupapa, e hoa tāne Ernest, acknowledgements once again to you, Ernest, for inclining the ears of creation towards this kaupapa, and to the great work that is intended through this workshop. And thank you once again for taking up the responsibility of Ngā Pauatane in respect to Te Aho Tapu, or the sacred threads, which are in the gifts of creation, which adorn our living world. And also taking up the special responsibility of tangata whenua in Aotearoa to impress upon the forum the importance of leaving a hope and a legacy for the future generations.
Sure.
In case you're wondering if you're in the right place, this is an industry research collaboration led by the Connective in association with Scion, the New Zealand Forestry Research Institute, Tane's Tree Trust, and Ngā Pauatane, the Māori Forestry Association. Acknowledging it once again Te Urirako, New Zealand Forest Service, who are the lead government agency for this project under the Forestry and Wood Processing Industry Transformation Plan. We also acknowledge you all as our esteemed collaboration partners, both local and international, on this session, and your representation of a diverse ecosystem of change. We hope you'll become educators alongside us in this topic of close to nature, continuous cover forestry. Ko au, ko Ramona, my name is Ramona. I'll be facilitating this workshop session. This is the third of 6 sessions in a workshop series to build collective knowledge and agreement on CCF, continuous cover forestry, business models for Aotearoa New Zealand. All sessions are being recorded and the sessions can be accessed from the registration website in the days ahead. Okay, so let me just get a hold of my technology, sorry. Okay. All right. Here's a picture today for the session and how it will run. As in previous weeks, the speakers are building on a complete picture around this topic. Today, we're very lucky. We have some world-renowned developers of close-to-nature models of forestry presenting their incredible story and providing perhaps some best advice for us here in New Zealand. I'll introduce Yuri and Dushan properly in a couple of minutes. For now, please just note if you have a question or a comment, Mel from Tane's Tree Trust is on the call, and she is monitoring the chat function and the hands up emoji. So if you could use both those functions to indicate your intention to ask or comment or be involved. So from here, we'll have 30 minutes of presentation time, and then that will be followed by 40 minutes of audience discussion. Here's a reminder of the guiding principles for our workshop series. Put your hand up if you've got any questions about that. Mel, if you can let me know if there's a hand up. And here is a snapshot of who's in the room with us today. You can see we've got a really nice kind of balance and diversity of people and interests in the room with us today. Okay, so recapping on some of the main points over the last 2 weeks. Session 1, set the scene for the series. And last week's session, we were grateful to have presentations on the forces that are pushing us, that's us in this room, and us, the royal us, the we, outside of this room, to reconsider the way that we do forestry in New Zealand. Yeah. Does anybody want to pick up on a theme from either session 1 or session 2? Or is anybody that wants to share an impression that's kind of they've held on to over the last week? Mel will let me know if you've got your hand up. Okay, nothing, all right. So let's just push on into our presentations for this morning. So this point, let's just shift our minds from Aotearoa to the other side of the world, to Europe. And I'll do that through a key distinction. If you were to ask a new graduate of forestry in New Zealand, what is silviculture? They would likely tell you it is the business or the practice of pruning productive stands of pine for improved growth and form. They would not necessarily associate it with native forests or conservation. In this New Zealand cultural paradigm is an indication of how we, New Zealanders, think about forestry. In other parts of the globe, this might be considered peculiar. And in the world at large, silviculture is a term used for single stem harvesting or removing trees from the forest. It's the primary method for maintaining old growth forest health and continuous canopy cover in perpetuity. So how far off the norm are we, and does that matter? What is different about the forest ecosystem of support in other countries and other continents? So today, we're extremely fortunate to learn from a transcendent and yet humble force for change to forestry management globally. Anyone working in the field of silviculture would consider the work of this team to be at the peak of sustainable forestry. Our esteemed presenters represent the work of ProSilva Central Europe and Slovenia, the University of Ljubljana, and the charitable forest research community of Pahernik. The forest model they represent has leveraged the ability for Slovenian landowners and communities to yield non-timber and timber values and cultural benefits using a combination of science and culture. It is my pleasure now to introduce Professor Yuri Daci and Dusan Rosenberger, who are here to present on their history, their landforms, the endemic flora and fauna that has traditionally shaped the practice of forestry in that part of the world for hundreds of years, but also, in addition to that, what the communities in these countries have done in recent decades to empower the forestry community with the benefits of science, research, technology, training, and public policy. Okay, so Yuri, pozdravljeni. Excuse my pronunciation, but I've just said to you, welcome and hello. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. Do you hear me well? Is everything fine with connection?
We do. We hear you.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I'm really happy to have the opportunity to talk, to discuss with you today. First, I really appreciate, enjoy your beautiful land. Secondly, I like to speak about close to nature forestry. And thirdly, I see this is a bit expanding in the last decades, and this makes me happy in a way. So I will start first with some historical development of close to nature forestry in Central Europe and Slovenia. And then I will present the current practices that we have, especially silvicultural systems. And we will discuss close to nature forestry and ecosystem services, especially a bit of economics. And we'll conclude with barriers and enablers. And with Dusan, we will have about 30 minutes. We split that. Perhaps my part is a bit longer, about 20 minutes. His part is a bit shorter. I don't know why we did so, perhaps because I'm older and Dusan is younger, but anyhow, yeah. So please forward. The development of close to nature forestry in Europe has been influenced by both good and bad experiences. For example, we had a lot of deforestation going on for centuries. We had a lot of degraded private forests. We have perhaps 300 years ago, only half of the forest that we have today. And there was really a shortage of timber all around Europe. But even greater problem was the erosion. We are in a hilly part of Europe and a lot of precipitation, similar as you have, similar problems. And because of this, for example, Switzerland in 1854 started ETH, their Institute of Technology, Polytechnical University, for educating engineers for solving these problems. And one of the problems was for forestry. So the first forestry engineers were educated there. And I would say ETH in Zurich is kind of cradle of close to nature forestry. And Switzerland was the first country in the world that in 1902 totally prohibited clear-cut forest management because of these, let's say, bad examples. And the second country worldwide to follow Switzerland was Slovenia in 1948. Forward, please. In Slovenia, we had even bigger problems compared to Switzerland because we have special area above near Venice and above Trieste. And a lot of wood was extracted for centuries for building cities, for building ships from this area. And overgrazing was going on. So this was totally bare land. It's called karst. And from this region, it's also the English term karstification, which is now, let's say, used for similar problems, degradation all around the world. So this karst area was the first attempt to start new forest on the completely destroyed land. And the anecdote says that Austro-Hungarian emperor at the time, Franz Joseph, he was overturned in a carriage because of heavy wind, burya. And he said, now we have to do something. And this was difficult because people were against, they were afraid that they would be losing areas for grazing and so on. But still, they managed to reforest 30,000 hectares at that time. So this was really kind of big success in a way. Forward, please. In the Alps, we have at that time clear-cut management, so-called German school with clear cutting, then regularly planting conifers, especially spruce. But on the other hand, we had also a long tradition of so-called farmer selection forestry. And this started already in late Middle Ages. And the farmers had opportunity to sell the large diameter timber for building cities. Cities were made of wood at that time for shipyards and so on. And this was done by river rafting. And please go forward. Some examples from more conservative farmers were nice, but on the other hand, this individual cutting also resulted sometimes in, let's say, bad results. If you continue to take the best trees out of the forest from, let's say, decade to decade, then in the end, you have really a poor condition in the forest. And universities at that time were fighting against this, and they were presenting clear cutting with planting as something very advanced. So we had already at that time, let's say, two developments. Further, please. And it wasn't until the development of control method, which meant the first involvement of science to control the success of this type of individual felling of, let's say, uneven age forests. And this was a French forester, Adolphe Guirnaud. And this was, let's say, in late 19th century. And this is still kind of basis for our control of success. This means regular inventories, perhaps every 10 years, and then comparing if we are reaching our goals or not. And with this method, the close to nature forestry 100 years ago, or a bit more than 100 years ago, could really compete with clear cutting and planting. Continue, please. And in Europe, current practice is still prevalent, let's say, traditional silvicultural systems. The most important is clear cut, similar as in New Zealand. It's also accompanied by regular shelter wood and wedge system. And all these traditional systems, they are about 70% of area in Europe. Continue, please. And this is how it looks like. For example, this is in one of our neighboring country, natural regeneration of pedunculate oak, but still on a large scale shelter wood. So for me, this is far from natural processes, so I wouldn't call this close to nature forestry. And this is from our boreal forest in Europe. Again, you see kind of, let's say, destruction, I would say, of forest site, no forest climate, erosion, and so on. Forward, please. And the close to nature forestry is organized around a set of principles. And I will not go very detailed around them. I guess you are familiar with some of them, and you can also later ask if something is not clear. But I would just pick few which are not so often connected to close to nature forestry, but are very important. And one is that we are really concerned about preserving forest climate and soil fertility. And then further, we are also very much focused on individual trees. If we are harvesting in small groups, we are always looking at each individual tree. And then we never use fertilizers or pesticides in this type of management. What is the scientific basis? Very important is knowledge on site conditions. So, for example, we have very good phytosociological mapping of the sites, and we know about potential natural vegetation. Further, natural disturbance regime is important, and we are connecting this, let's say, with tree regeneration ecology. For example, oak is kind of used to larger disturbances, so it's difficult to work with oak in really small areas, so you have to make kind of gaps and so on. So this connection, natural disturbance regime, tree regeneration ecology is very important. And then we have two important guiding philosophies, and the first one is control method, which I already explained, kind of following development of forest with regular inventories. And the second one is called tending. And this means that after our work in the forest, the condition should be better than before our intervention. One example, we are concerned about future trees, about crop trees, we are helping them. And first question is, do we have enough of those trees? And the second question is always, are they released? Are they free to grow? And in this way, I can assess every forest if it's managed well or if it's not managed. Continue, please. So what we are using now, for example, in Slovenia, Switzerland, part of the Alps, selection forests with the longest tradition, with really very individual harvesting of individual trees, and then irregular shelter wood, which means mimicking natural gap dynamics. This means we will work with, let's say, some gaps, some groups, with oak, which is more light demanding, perhaps even a bit larger gaps with pine, but with beech, silver fir, shade tolerant conifers, really small scale, and combine all these approaches. And we have another interesting system which is called freestyle silviculture. Some colleagues are also critical towards because they think that everything is allowed with this system, but this is completely wrong. This is very controlled system with a control method, but we are allowed to use different silvicultural tools. And we apply this in cases, for example, when we have to convert spruce monocultures. For example, when you will start, you will have to convert some of your Monterey pie monocultures. And then we have some forest damage by natural disturbances as you have them. And so it's kind of much difficult way compared to, let's say, single tree selection or irregular shelter wood. But we always control this with this tending approach. Continue, please. And the third approach is Dauerwald, continuous cover forestry, which is the most spread within Pro Silva at the moment. It's very close to, let's say, single tree selection, but it's much less involved with the structure and control of the structure of the trees. So in a way, it's a bit similar to our freestyle silviculture approach. So one picture of this in continuation approach. Please continue. So this is one example what can be done with this approach in relatively short period. Our colleagues in former Eastern Germany decided to abandon system of conifer monocultures, and they started to convert, and this is what they achieved in 25 years. So we see mixed forest, we see a lot of structure, we see natural regeneration, we see nice quality. So with a bit decreasing ungulates, sowing, seeding some conifers, and respecting broadleaf trees. So this is their success with this continuous cover forestry in a relatively short time. Next slide, please. But we use also additional measures for nature conservation. One is plant non-intervention, like network of forest reserves. Then we have adapted management. This means temporal or spatial limitation of interventions. For example, for capercaillie, we are not allowed to harvest in the springtime, and also some other special tending measures. Next slide, please. Now about ecosystem services. So we can discuss the importance for, let's say, ecological functions because of the ecosystem continuity, because we are preserving microclimate and soil. We have much reduced erosion, very nice for our protection forest, for biodiversity. Our experience also confirms that this is excellent for recreation, urban forest, because of scenic value of this forest, and this is quite successful in, let's say, urban forests. And I believe that this is also very important regarding economics, because we have lower investments, we have lower risks. Next slide, please. I will not go into detail about economics, but just to stress that here are important direct influences on management success and also indirect influences. And among direct influences is that we don't need planting, basically. And we have much less pre-commercial operations like tending. And we apply kind of punctual situational thinning, so-called. So we don't thin every fourth or fifth road out of the plantation, but just, let's say, help individual trees. And I believe we have much lower external costs, especially if the wood is used nearby, locally, much less pollution. And especially we have lower management risks. This is clear. Colleague from Munich, Professor Knocke, he did a lot of modeling and he was able to show that mixed uneven aged forests are much more stable, much more resilient, and this is also economically a plus. And we have also very good possibilities to connect with, let's say, ecotourism, with hiking, gathering, and so on. So it's also a plus for tourism in Slovenia. Next slide, please. And regarding economics, it's really important to harvest individual trees. We have auctions for high value timber, and it's really very high price for individual trees. For example, last year it was about almost 24,000 euros for a sycamore maple. We had 2,000 euros for cubic meter of spruce. So it's perhaps 5, 6, 10 times or more higher than, let's say, normal price. Next slide, please. Now I will conclude with barriers and enablers. So we have knowledge gaps. For example, environmental change is really a challenge for us. We have to start perhaps a bit more planting with special trees, with special provenances, and so on. Then mechanized harvesting could be a problem, although we have also nice examples of mechanized harvesting. Economics is also not always so clear. And but one of the barriers is that we have overall decreasing interest in management. But this is, I guess, all around in developed world, that people are not so interested in forestry job. We have some problems with subsidy systems. We have overbrowsing going on. This is problem for natural regeneration. And regarding enablers, for sure, Dusan will talk in continuation about Prosilva in Slovenia and Europe. We have tradition, we have some very good practices, and we have quite organized forestry in Slovenia, and this is paid by the state. So every forest owner has good information from Forest Service about his forest and how to manage in the future and so on. And he can follow this advice if he wants for free. Next slide. This is the last one. Not this is the one before. Just impression how the landscape in Slovenia looks like. And here are some small plantation of very valuable conifers and mixed with indigenous broadleaf trees. So you can see it's kind of very, very, very patchy. And the last slide, please. So good and bad examples influenced close to nature forestry in Central Europe. We have basically 3 different systems. One is single tree selection, group selection, and then irregular shelter wood and so-called freestyle system. We control this with this standing approach. And there is economic advantage regarding saw timber production with close to nature forestry. But on the other hand, we cannot compete with forest industry regarding mass products, because also our economies of scale are limited, and incentives are important, and also local markets are here very, very important. And we have some problems at the moment with coordination of forest policy, because this has to be in a way optimized. Now, there are people wanting to increase carbon. There are some Others would like to increase biodiversity, the third economics, but this is not possible, and we have to optimize. And it seems that climate adapted close to nature forestry is very favorable from the point of view of optimizing various forest functions to develop, let's say, stable forest for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yuri. That was jam-packed with lots of really good stuff there. And yeah, I'm sure there'll be lots of questions coming up. Thank you very much. Let's move on to Dushan. Dushan's a prolific publisher of papers, and of course Yuri is involved in that as well. Dushan's here to share with us the purpose and I guess the key objectives of the Pro-Silva Europe movement. It's an advocacy group for this type of forestry in Europe. And these are the movers and shakers of forest management that uses natural processes. Dushan is the vice chair of Pro-Silva Europe, and he will talk to us more about close to nature principles. Ian, Mel, are we ready to go on the should I stop sharing?
Yeah, we're all set.
Okay. All right, we're just doing a little bit of a change over here. There we go. Over to you, Dushan.
Thank you, everybody. Is the techniques working? Can you hear me well? Nothing.
We can.
You do? It's okay.
We can.
Okay. Oh, okay, then I would like to thank you for this opportunity to present some of the ideas that are developed or were developed inside this organization that we are all part of and try to promote. And this organization, it is dealing with close to nature forestry, Silva. I'm sure that many of you heard about it. You did some, you know what it is all about. So it's going to be a short presentation about what are the activities that we do by this. Next slide. So first of all, this is a non-profit, a non-governmental organization, and it's some sort of association. In original text, there was a line which said this is Association of Foresters Advocates. But really this turned into much more right now, I think. That's why here, this is Association of People. I will just shortly present how this developed fast and what are the activities we are doing. Yes. It was founded, the whole organization, in 1989, mostly as a result of several silviculture professors from the Central Europe and also Eastern Europe. They had these regular meetings, and they were discussing the permanent or the current forest management, which was prevailingly clear cutting, and they somehow they wanted to do something differently. And so Pro-Silva organization was the result of this different thinking. It was founded in Slovenia, and also the main say the promoter of this idea was our professor. I had the privilege that I was also his lectures, which were inspiring. And at that time, when they founded this organization, there was also a declaration published, Declaration of Urbano Code, which had certain information about the concepts that should be promoted inside this organization. And there's many different bullet points, but I choose this one because I think this is showing a different approach to forest management. And you have the sentence here. It said that what we want to do is patient civic culture that respects natural laws, promotes diversity, sustainable development, structural richness, and natural generation of forests composed of local native species. So what I was thinking when reading this, I saw that these first two words are really important. So it's about patient civic culture. Could be a bit problematic in terms of production or maximizing the showing that they were thinking something completely different than the rest regular forest at that time. And one of the reasons for this thinking that they had was definitely, probably, I think, this is a photo of all the founders of Pro Silva at that time, visiting old growth forests in Slovenia. The structure and the processes they were observing these old growth forests were inspiring for them. And the idea of mimicking the nature also in managed forests developed actually inside the old growth forest. Next slide. There are some general principles listed in our documents, and these are to some extent put into these four main principles that we really want to promote or use, and they're also hierarchically listed. So the first one is the conservation forest, and then we have soil and climate that we was also talking about. Then we have on the third place we have other products, and of course then all the ecosystem services that will follow or that are expected to manage. What I put in yellow is also so sustainable, but this definitely is not only nature protection, because we have profitable also in the same sentence. It means these are management processes also served to get, let's say, close to nature material or some funds out. Next slide, please. So the organization is non-profitable, and all the work we do is pro bono. Don't get paid for it. And the organization is like this. We have a president. In this time, this is Mr. who is basically taking the most of the load. In this organization, I will talk later what are our activities, and then we have the board and also a lot of other board members that are jumping in when necessary, when we are solving some problem or organizing some activities inside. So far, we have 23 full members. They're listed here. Just recently, Finland was also included. We don't have the flag here. So this is the core team of Pro Silva, basically is Europe centered. And then please, next slide. We also have some members that are under development, there are communication, and it's not yet if they're going to be included or when. It depends on the status of the implementation. Also, we have associated members which are monitoring what we are doing or observing, and then in this case, they get certain communication from our side later on. Right? So last year, we were sending out questionnaires to all of the ProSilva members, and you can see that like this is information for 2022. We had like around 6,000 members, and what you can see here is the structure of the ProSilva member, and I think it is a very important figure actually, because it's showing that it's not just about people with theories that are included. We have forest owners with very precise and defined goals, what they want to do with their properties. We also have a lot of scientists, and we do have forest-related services. So a lot of forest managers, also administration, and then you can see this section of this circle which tells other people is relatively large too. So we have students, NGOs, municipalities, so a very different mixture of people who are supporting the same idea. Next, please. Just shortly, what do we do? First of all, most or all of the members are involved in some sort of a practice of small-scale natural. So they could be forest owners who are dealing or using this kind of management in their properties. Sometimes we have managers or people who are giving the service of, let's say, managing other people's, other owners' properties, who are trying to promote this, and they do it in combination with owners. We do have some university teachers who are promoting this kind of forest management between a normal thing that we do with curriculum. So all of them are trying to go in practice do what we said before. But what actually is done was explained by Yuri, more or less. It more or less it's about uneven systems, so I will not go into this. Next is, but what I want to say more is about what we do inside, or how this organization is working for its members. So we have this inside or within exchange of ideas and experiences within the ProSilva, and most of the times it means we have annual meetings where we where this communication is possible, or some cross-border excursion. The next slide. This is the first thing, and normally we would not spend almost we don't spend almost no time inside the building. So all the time we go out. Wherever we go, different countries are organizing these annual meetings. We meet in the forest, and we get to see the forest that is managed by this principle. Oh, this photo is showing this year's meeting in Ireland, and we have a very nice and even-aged forest, which is actually composed of non-native species. They have a lot of plantation, but let's say this is one step to go from a pure plantation to something differently. And the most important thing is we have people here who are managing it with a lot of data, and you can see the forest. And I think this is the most important thing, because people then can exchange their ideas or their experience. Next slide. We are concerned about, or we are observing the forests most of the time, but that's not the only focus that ProSilva is going for. Next slide, please. So we are also concerned about climate change, about disturbance regimes, which are disturbing also our management approach. So this is also discussed on this meeting, how to tackle this problem. But we also go further. Next slide, please. We are also discussing where the wood that we produce will be used. So like we had a visit to a building construction site where most of the wood that was produced locally was used, let's say. All these discussions are going on in these annual meetings, and there's a lot of communication between the members, which is important for development of the idea, which is not definitely not stable, fixed. It grows all the time. Next. What we also do, we try to promote the idea, disseminate these ideas in different way. So they are listed here, you can see it. We do have a workshop. Next slide, please. No, homepage. Have a homepage, you probably know it. If you don't know it, go visit there and get most of the information I was giving you there. Anyhow, this is a homepage of a central organization, ProSilva Europe. Next slide, please. We managed to develop also homepage from different ProSilva members. So there are quite some now. These are listed here on this photo. Next slide, please. And we do also other promotional activities. We do use social media. There are some scientific publications that were published also inside ProSilva or using the ProSilva data. Yuri can tell more about this. We have different press releases, newsletters, and also, let's say, on the homepage, we have different interviews. So these are all activities to promote this idea. Slide, please. One thing that developed lately after this COVID era is also these online webinars that we are doing right now. There were some nice webinars organized through ProSilva. I'm sure some of you were there or listening to it, where we try to promote or invite some people who are really important in the future politics, let's say, forestry on the European level. One of them was also Marco Nida, and some of these webinars are really popular. Lots of people are. So another ongoing thing that is like in progress all the time is the system of exemplary forests. What ProSilva want to do is to have its exemplary forests that can also be reference stands or training plots as a backbone, actually, idea. What does it mean? Why do we want this? This is actually ensuring the continuity in forest management. So not just talking about it, but you have a forest that was managed in this way for many decades, and we want to keep it. So for generations to come, I may say, but also this could be good like locations for teaching, and again, also good locations for research. Next slide, please. So it's in progress. Like we said, we are hoping to get a unified database which will include all of these forests that were mentioned before, and in this way be available to anybody who would like to see or maybe analyze what kind of processes are going on in temporary forests. We do have some brochures that are where these principles are listed. There's an ongoing also process of translations. You can see here what is available right now. And this is also one way to get close to, let's say, different end. Slide, please. So this is a very shortly vision of ProSilva Europe. We are discussing the vision all the time inside the executive board. We think we need to adapt to situations which are definitely changing all the time. And we see that we probably need to strengthen also the political influence if we want to really make some changes at a higher level. We do want to have more involvement in European projects. We are working on that as we speak. So we try to get some funding for it because so far only basic costs were covered by our fee. But if you want to do more with this promotion, we need to get more funds. Definitely, we want to develop further, and to do that, in near future, we will have a congress of basic board members. We will discuss that we want to do in the future. Next slide, please. So some of these processes are already going on. In the last 2 years, we were very active, especially our president, but also other people. Yuri was very active also. So we are participating, and we became an important partner in discussion about the future forest policies in Europe. Processes where we are this way or another present. The next slide. But there is one thing that is common to all the ProSilva members, and that is that silviculture is a culture for forests. But we don't think it's just a culture for forests. We also think that people are important. So on every meeting that we have, there's a lot of music. So music could be performed in the forest like this. Next slide. Or also outside the forest. So all the members of the band you see here, they are all foresters and ProSilva members. We were discussing forests an hour ago now that we were able to sit down and play music. And we think it's important. So ProSilva is not just about forests, it's also about people. And we have a last slide, please. And this is proudly presenting the ProSilva Slovenia team, who is looking forward to the bright future of ProSilva. So we are happy and we are optimistic because we also were able to get into our organization a lot of young people, the future for the organization. Actually, this was
Very good. Is that the end, Dushan? You're at the end there? Fantastic. I want to say, I think it's Nailepsha Whala to both Dushan and Yuri. Thank you very much for excellent presentations and for all the thought that's gone into making this relevant for us here in Aotearoa. Thank you so much. Lots of questions coming through the chat there. I want to Mark, if you're still on the call, it would be good for you to respond to my earlier assertion that new graduates come out not really understanding what silviculture is. I'm happy for you to respond to that, and then we'll get on to some of the questions that have been asked, and some comments made by Yvette and Nathan, and a couple of others. Mark, are you there?
Yeah. Morena, Ramona, can you hear me okay?
Morena, I can.
Oh, wonderful. First of all, thank you to you and to Tane's Tree Trust and the speakers we've had so far. It's been a very stimulating series, so I thank you for that. But as a teacher at Te Kura Ngāhere, our School of Forestry, I couldn't let your statement go by. I'm sorry. We do cover continuous cover and close to nature forestry in our course at second and fourth years. It's taught widely. In fact, some of the slides that we've seen from Yuri look a lot like the slides that I use in my second year course. If one gets the impression that our graduates only know about the specifics of plantation forestry with a very narrow range of species, it's because the vast majority end up in those jobs, and that's where their work experience sends them. But when they graduate, they have been taught a broader view of silviculture. Perhaps one definition is, managing forest to meet the needs of society, governing society in its broadest sense. That is silviculture, and we teach them that. So thank you for the opportunity to put the point of view from Te Kura, and looking forward to the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for setting me straight and and explaining why things why that impression might have come through. I'm going to hand some time over to you, Yvette, to ask your question, and then followed by Nathan, who's made a couple of comments, then Doug, and then I'll come back and ask some specific questions to two people, one being James Treadwell, if he's on the call. So just get ready. Yvette, are you there?
Yeah, thanks, Ramona. I just want to thank both of the presenters. They were excellent presentations and very, very interesting. I am a silviculturist by training. I trained overseas, even though I'm a New Zealander. And so when I was looking at your slides and hearing what you're working on, I fully endorse it. This is the kind of thing that we should be working on here. I think one thing that I've learned from looking at the history of forest management around the world is that we are doomed to failure if we just simply pick up a system from one place and move it around to another. We really need to adapt it to our local species. Even the exotic species in New Zealand will behave differently than they do in their own native habitats. We have different climate, different soils, different cultures, markets, etc. And it's a huge task to try and take these systems and adapt them locally. Radiata pine, we've had over 100 years of research trying to perfect that management, and we need similar efforts in these other systems. So I guess I wanted to ask, how do we start doing that? Do you have any advice on what parts we should focus on first? What's the key parts that we need to perfect, or at least start to understand before we can start developing similar kinds of place-based local systems that would work here in New Zealand?
Yuri, do you have a response?
I can try a bit. So one initial condition could be a plantation. And we have a lot of similar initial conditions in Europe. Could be exotic plantation or could be spruce outside its natural range. And this is kind of tricky, but because of the wind, especially if you have older plantation that were not thinned, but there are a lot of, let's say, ideas we can learn from each other. For example, we were much more successful if we start really early with converting the plantations, and then later to allow native species to come with some, let's say, conifer regeneration, some native species regeneration, could be also planting some of native species. Ungulates are really a problem. Could be, I see now in Ireland that they are facing this increasing density of ungulates. And so another, and there is a lot of experience with gradually converting conifer plantations in Europe. Experience for more than 100 years. And the next approach would be if you start with bare land. So we also have some experience with our cars, which was not only bare, but it was without soils. You have seen the ladies were carrying the soil on buckets, on heads. So it was really difficult, but it was successful. So the first step was kind of plantation of conifers, and now these conifer plantations are being gradually thinned and regenerated again. And we do not plant much in Slovenia because we have about 60% of forest. But for example, in Ireland, they are now starting in a very clever way with kind of patchy planting with different species, with some, let's say, conifers, even exotics because of the value, but still it's combination. So a step forward is if you don't plant such a large block, but if you try kind of mixed plantations and perhaps on mixed trees on a bit smaller scale. This is the first step in the right directions. So it's, I would say there is quite some success in Europe with conversion with these different initial states. But I also seen in New Zealand some years ago, I've seen natural regeneration of radiata pine. And so I felt kind of almost as at home when I entered this forest. So it's, I mean, also there are quite different approaches possible with radiata pine. Perhaps you lose a bit of increment, but again, you can decrease the risk in this way. So if you take care for the soil, take care for the, let's say, microclimate, and perhaps you don't have so much felling residuals and so on. So it's, I mean, it's possible to go, as Dusan says, slow steps and change a little bit, small things at a time, and then you can be, but you can also achieve quite a lot of things in a relatively short time. I was really surprised when I've seen some nice examples in Ireland, especially in Ireland, and then in Hungary, and they didn't have any uneven age forest, let's say 20 years ago, and now such a, let's say, nice structured forest in a relatively short time. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Yuri. I think probably the answer to your question, Yvette, is that we just keep talking, and we keep working together to find the way forward, and we try many different options. One of the things that really interests me about the way that ProSilva Europe is working is around these exemplary forests, and it would be good to learn a little bit more about that, and we're going to do that next week when we have Robert Purcell with us to talk about an exemplary forest method that's being used in the US. But I'm going to pass some time over to you, Nathan. Is there anything you wanted to say about the comment you made in the chat?
Yeah, so my question is based on my limited understanding, which probably comes from Wikipedia, that forest ownership in Slovenia is really highly fragmented with hundreds of thousands of small blocks under 5 hectares. I mean, I think this came from Wikipedia, so I could be wrong. But if true, I was wondering if Yuri might be able to explain how harvest and management is coordinated so that these small forest blocks remain economic. Thanks.
Yeah, this is true. We have kind of small scale property, and this is also true for Europe compared to the New World. The property is relatively small, and the people are really attached to their forestry. Forests, they have kind of special, let's say, family attachment to the trees and forest, and a lot of farmers are harvesting by themselves. They are very skilled. For example, we had some visit from nature conservation people from the European Commission, and they didn't believe that in the forest that we are visiting, there was harvest going on 3 years ago. So they are really very careful also with using machinery, but we are also using mechanized harvest, and we have also state-owned forest where are larger blocks of forest, so it's variable. And these skills, I believe, are important. This is dangerous work, so the people have to be very well educated. They need to have really very good protection, good equipment, and so this, let's say, forest safety and kind of work with a slow pace, and this costs a little bit. So, but still, also this individual harvest is not so expensive because they often harvest really large diameter trees, and sometimes they just have to harvest just few trees per day, and they filled their normative for the day. So these skills are important, but they could be taught, so it's not so difficult in a way. And also we have some bad examples with mechanized harvest, but also some very, very good examples with mechanized harvest. And also we have some people, operators of the harvesting machines, who are interested in Pro Silva. They're also members of the Pro Silva. And at the time speaking, the president of Irish Pro Silva is entrepreneur, so he's involved. Liam, he's involved with harvesting, and it's very good to have this discussion in the forest: how to harvest trees, not to harm the regeneration, remaining stands, soil, and so on. This is very important.
Fantastic, thank you, Yuri. On the topic of small woodlots in New Zealand, I know that there is an objective or an action under the Industry Transformation Plan, or the Forestry and Wood Processing Industry Transformation Plan. One of the intentions with that is to aggregate or bring together those small woodlot owners, and to find a way that we can work together. And so that's a conversation, I guess, between New Zealand Farm Foresters, Tane's Tree Trust, Ngā Pauatane, and others yet to be had. But a great question, Nathan. Thank you for responding, Yuri. Doug, you wanted to say something in relation to the wider opportunities that forestry presents.
Yep.
Are you on the call?
Yeah. Shall I go now?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, so I just, my only curiosity is that what we see in New Zealand with what you might say non-continuous cover forestry, you know, clearfell, we still see our plantation forests producing other outputs, and particularly around recreation and mountain biking and other things, but even in some cases, perhaps very minor outputs around other fibers. And also we know there's some conservation values that we get out of our plantation forests with certain bird species and even certain plant species. And I saw the other day a very interesting presentation on indigenous bugs and insects that were more prevalent in plantation forests even than in some or many indigenous forests. So my question or my comment is, continuous cover forestry, do you equally manage for those other types of output, or is timber still your primary focus, and the other three categories that you mentioned, are they secondary, or are you proactively aiming for the whole four in a more equal way?
I might throw that question to you, Dushan. I've seen you've produced some papers on this topic.
Thank you. I would say that in most cases, the general ecosystem services expected from certain forests are analyzed before we do management. And in many cases, we have the production function second or third on the list. And in these occasions, the system is adapted. So we still do positive selection, let's say individual trees, but the tree that is our goal is different than the tree that is our goal in the managed forest when we want to production of really high quality wood. But most of the forests still are a production forest. So we would be aiming at the production of high quality wood, but at the same time, we would be concerned about other ecosystem services. So I can say, for example, urban forests completely different. You need to have some other structures that are good for the visitors. And the second example maybe is also the protection forest. The protection function is actually above all the other factors, especially if it's about infrastructure, and have these like steep hills, a lot of torrents, the slides that Yuri showed, like devastation of different slopes. In these cases, of course, other functions are much more important. But the system is allowing all these functions to be promoted. Only question is how you want to do which function.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, just lost the tech there for a minute. Good question, Doug. I'm going to give some time to Roger from Tomorrow's Forest to ask his question with regard to the national environmental standards for plantation forests. Roger, are you still on the call?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go for it.
We haven't really covered this before, but in New Zealand, there are two spheres of forestry. Well, we have actually, but some of the legislation in our native forests, our privately owned native forests, there's the Forest Act controls things, and for some species, there's limits on the harvesting, single trees for podocarps, and for beech, a maximum clear-cut size of, or coop size of 0.5 hectare. For exotic plantations, there's the national environmental standard for plantation forestry, contains no meaningful limits on clear-cut size. Is that something that we should be addressing?
Who are you asking that question to, Roger? Is it the whole room?
I think
the whole room would probably have
I mean,
answers.
probably it should be actually, but from the point of view of our two European guests, it's probably aimed at them.
Okay. Yuri, do you understand the question? Do you understand the context?
So it's a question about prohibition of clear cutting or yeah.
Or limits.
Or limits, yeah. We have quite straight limit. So it's just 1 tree height. And this could mean in terms of area, perhaps less than half a hectare. If not regenerated, if it's already regenerated, this is not considered clear cut, overgrown with regeneration. But in practice, you know that north slope or east slope could be quite different regarding the effect of clear cut. Then if you are somewhere near the torrent, the coarse woody debris could be problematic because of the torrent. For example, with light demanding species like oaks is again different. You can make some larger gaps. So this is on site, the decision of a local forester and the forest inspector. So they are trained persons to decide if there are problems with clear cutting. And I would say regarding New Zealand, this is kind of more a political question, but I've seen you had problems with let's say floating timber residuals after these heavy rains, and so I guess you have to work carefully towards excluding protection forests. And regarding water management of heavy rains, we will have even more of them. This is our future, there should be some strict regulation how to manage forest along the in the background of torrent areas. So I would surely prohibit clear cutting in those areas. And for example, Switzerland has such a regimes. We have similar regimes, and I guess this is quite successful. Then at least I would say the damage is much more limited in this case.
Thank you, Yuri. So there is quite a fair bit of interrogation going on around the policy space in relation to the national environmental standards. I won't put any of the government people on the call in the hotspot around that, but there is a fair bit of I guess interaction going on around the country in respect to that. I wanted to bring out a couple of points. There was something that you said, Dushan, around forest inventory being held by and maintained by government, but with the community making decisions. I thought that was actually a really good point. Something really, there's potential possibly in that. And with emphasis on the community making the decisions, but the government or you know, the system, the public system potentially being able to provide or create an enabling environment for forest inventory to be held by and maintained by and for the country. A second observation I made was around the strengthening of political influence for forestry, and I think we would all agree that in New Zealand right now forestry is taking a beating. there's some merit there also to strengthening the political influence. That was the question I was going to ask James, but he's not on the call, unfortunately. I can see a question here, or actually a comment made by Kit around the national policy standards, national policy statement for Indigenous biodiversity. Kit, do you want to say something? You will be our last audience member.
Yeah, it's really just the fact that there is, well, building on the comment you've made, that there is very much still a separation culture in New Zealand between trees and farmland. And at the moment, you could fairly unequivocally say that farming is still absolutely ruling the roost in our culture. In fact, in some ways, we may be going backward. But at the same time, we do have this legislation that is now in place that is requiring, I think it's 10%, or regional councils are having to plan to have 10% of their urban areas in some sort of vegetative cover. And obviously the target of that is native cover. But if ever there was a potential opportunity where you might be able to develop models at a small scale to get those exemplars in place, and maybe also to socialise the concept that some of it might be well done in exotic species, not just our standard radiata, then those would be the opportunity, I would say, because if you could get a buy-in of the community, you'd get all the other benefits. And some of our cities are absolutely desperately in need of other ecosystem services close to the intensification that's going to be required in the future. So I just see that there may be a political wedge that could be worked there to develop that. That might be a bit easier than the brave new world out in the rural environment, which is still going to be an awful challenge in many cases.
Yes. Thank you, Kit. Thank you very much. I think everybody will agree that there's much to be gained from continuing to talk, continuing to collaborate and cooperate around this question of forestry and where it might go into the future, and and what role, or so that it can play the important role that it should for our country, for New Zealand, and for our world. Thank you, everybody who has participated on the call this morning. Thank you, everybody who has attended. Thank you especially to our two great presenters this morning, both Yuri and Dushan. We're looking forward to seeing you all back again next Friday at, was it Friday or was it Thursday? Ian?
Friday.
Next Friday, same time?
Yep.
Next Friday at 7 a.m. Thank you all. Take care. Ka kite.
Take care. Thank you.